Hello and welcome to this episode of Lake Orion Sports Update. I'm Kevin McCormick. In this episode, we're going to see how the beginning of the season is going for Lake Orion, including the latest news in football, soccer, volleyball, and a whole lot more. On September 15th, the Dragons traveled to Troy Athens High School for an away game against the Redhawks. Lake Orion had a great first quarter thanks to sophomore Blaze Lauer. He had 2 touchdown passes during the first quarter, one to senior Pierce Burke and another to senior Casey Staranek, giving the Dragons a 14-0 lead going into the second quarter. Lauer continued his great game by getting a touchdown of his own in the second quarter. Senior kicker Parker Blust also scored a field goal just before halftime, bringing the Dragons to a 24-0 lead. The Redhawks in the second half made a push to get on the board and successfully got a touchdown. However, Lake Orion maintained a strong lead over Athens with a 24-6 score. In the final big play of the game, Dragons senior Sam Kinney earned a safety with a huge tackle hit, securing the first victory of the season for Lake Orion with a final score of 26-6. The following week, Lake Orion hosted a home game against Southfield A&T, which also served as the annual Pink Out game. Let's go to ONTV's Joe Johnson for the highlights.
On the evening of Friday, September 22nd, the Lake Orion Dragons hosted Southfield Arts and Tech for the annual Pink Out game. Fans, cheerleaders, and even the band sported pink to show support for A Mother's Wish, a local charity that helps families struggling with the impact of breast cancer. Members of the varsity football team wore jerseys with the names of loved ones battling the disease or have been lost to cancer. The Dragons headed into the game with a 1-3 record and were hoping to salvage their season with a win against the 2-2 Warriors. With 2 minutes left in the first quarter, the Warriors managed to reach Lake Orion's 1-yard line. Penalties and a stout Dragon defense kept the Warriors out of the end zone, but on 4th and goal, the Warriors go for it, and quarterback John Darby runs right up the middle for the first TD of the game. The 2-point conversion pass was good, and the Warriors were up 8-0. With just over 8 minutes left in the second quarter, after a Lake Orion touchdown was nullified by a penalty, the Dragons are facing a 3rd and 9 on the Warriors' 18-yard line. Quarterback Blaze Lauer takes the snap, feels the pressure, scrambles to his left, and goes 18 yards into the end zone for the score. The 2-point conversion was successful thanks to a Johnny Haggett run, and the score is tied at 8. The Warriors get the ball back and drive to the Dragons' 40. With Darby in shotgun, he takes the snap and goes deep, finding a wide-open Justin Meeks for the touchdown. The 2-point conversion was good, and the Warriors were back on top, 16-8. The Dragons put together a long drive, and with just under a minute left in the first half, with the ball on the Warriors' 8-yard line, Lauer rolls right and hits Tyler Vestran for the touchdown. Drew Van Heck ran in the 2-point conversion, and the game was all tied up at the half. Let's go to the third. A turnover on downs gives Southfield possession of the ball, and on 3rd and 3 at their own 38, Darby once again goes deep and hits Saunders Carter for a 62-yard touchdown to regain the lead. Darby took the ball in himself for the 2-point conversion. Southfield A&T 24, Lake Orion 16. With 5:53 left in the game, the Dragons are hoping to tie things up. Blaze Lauer takes the snap, and then this happens. But hold on, there is a flag on the field. The refs call holding on Lake Orion, and the touchdown is nullified. The ball comes all the way back and is placed on the 30. After a series of penalties called on players and the Dragons coaching staff, the game eventually ended with a score of 24-16. The Dragons fall to 1-4 while the Warriors improved to 3-2. We caught up with Dragons head coach John Blackstock after the game.
I just told the guys that, like the people that that donated money to the Mother's Wish and put names on the back of jerseys, you know, they'd say life isn't fair for the things that their families have gone through. And I told them football is the same way. Sometimes it's just not a fair game. This team has put in a lot of work and has come to practice and worked hard and is, I believe, coming together and creating a connection where they're starting to play for each other. And their effort can just never be questioned. And that's the thing that's not fair, is that it's not the outcome that we want. But it's a team that we're proud of because they come and they battle and they fight. And it's not an outcome that we're real happy with because, you know, we need to work on being a little more disciplined, you know, in assignments and execution. And we need to get better as coaches, as players, and the whole group.
After that tough loss, the Dragons players lined up for a special jersey ceremony. The family of those whose names appeared on the jerseys came out onto the field and was presented the jersey by the player who wore it. It was an emotional moment for players and fans alike, including Coach Blackstock.
The ceremony is, you know, it's tough to do after a loss, but I think it's important, you know, whether it's a win or a loss, because it does put things in perspective. This game is very important to us, but you know, it's not life. It's not life or death, like a lot of the people have gone through that have put names on the back of jerseys. And you know, yeah, I did a couple jerseys for family members that you know have lost their battle with cancer, and you know, I think it's an important event for our kids to be a part of.
The Dragons travel to Bloomfield Hills on September 28th, then go to Oxford on October 6th in the battle for the 00 trophy. From Dragon Stadium, this is Joe Johnson reporting for ONTV Sports.
Thanks, Joe. Now let's take a look at the current OAA Red standings. You see that Rochester Adams is in the lead at 3-1. Clarkson also has a 3-1 record. Southfield A&T the same. Lake Orion is struggling right now at 1-3, but the Dragons are working hard to turn it around and improve their record and improve their standings in the OAA Red category. ONTV's cameras will be at every home varsity football game during this season, as well as the away game at Oxford. So tune in to the game of the week on Comcast Channel 10, AT&T, UVerse Channel 99 on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays at 7 p.m. and Saturday at 1 p.m. for replays of all your favorite Dragon games. Visit OrionONTV.org for our programming schedule and for other replay times that best fit your viewing schedule. The Dragon volleyball team has continued to do well during the regular season. Let's check in with how they're doing, starting with the result of the Novi away tournament that they went to on September 9th. The Dragons meant business going into this tournament. Lake Orion swept their first 4 games of the day against Huron, Plymouth Christian Academy, Lakeland, and Clarkston, putting Lake Orion in the semifinals against Cass Tech. The Dragons' momentum continued, and they won the game against the Technicians 2-0, allowing Lake Orion to move on to the final game against the hosting team, the Novi Wildcats. The first set of the finals was extremely close, with the Dragons squeaking by with a final score of 25-23. The second set was another close one, but once again, Lake Orion had a stronger offense and swept the game 2-0, winning the tournament. On September 12th, Lake Orion traveled to Stony Creek for a game against the Cougars. The Dragons had a good start, winning the first set 25-16. The Cougars rallied in the second set and took the set 25-21, tying the game up at 1. Unfortunately for Lake Orion, the Cougars continued their strong offensive play and also won the third set 25-19, officially breaking the tie 2-1. It was in the fourth set of the evening that the Dragons fought back with a big push and tied the game back up at 2. It all came down to the fifth and final set of the night. The score was close, but Stony Creek overpowered the Dragons and won with a final score of 3-2. Following the tough loss against Stony Creek, the Dragons hosted a home game against the Troy Athens Redhawks on September 14th. The Dragons were determined to win the home game as soon as they walked onto the court. Lake Orion put up a strong offensive effort during the first set, winning it by a huge 12-point difference. During the second set, the Redhawks increased their scoring chances, but Lake Orion was still able to take the set 25-20, giving them a 2-0 lead. In the third and final set of the game, the Dragons did not hold back and took the set 25-11 and won the game 3-0. On September 16th, Lake Orion traveled to Portage Central for a neutral tournament. The Dragons had an impressive start to their tournament, earning 2-0 wins during the first 6 games against Portage Central, DeWitt, Schoolcraft, Gull Lake, Rockford, and Saline. The final game of the day for Lake Orion was a rematch against the Rockford Rams. The game started with a close set, 1-1 by the Rams, 25-22. The second set, however, was another close one. This time the Dragons ended up on top, 25-23, tying the overall game at 1. It came down to the third set to break the tie, but sadly it did not go in Lake Orion's favor, and Rockford took the set 17-15, as well as the overall game victory 2-1. The Dragons continued their road stint on September 19th and traveled to Bloomfield Hills. Lake Orion was able to snag a nice 3-0 victory after outscoring the Blackhawks in all 3 sets. Let's take a look at the volleyball OAA Red standings. You can see there that Clarkson is still undefeated at 3-0, but they have a 20-8 overall record. Lake Orion is right about in the middle with a 2-1 record and 35-5 overall. Lake Orion has got some good games coming up on their schedule that could propel them into a 3- or 4-way tie for first place, depending on how some things go. So we'll see how the Dragons fare in the rest of their season. Moving on to soccer, the boys soccer team continued with their 2017 season on September 12th as they traveled to North Farmington for an away game against the Raiders. Unfortunately for Lake Orion, the Raiders were able to get past the Dragon defenses and score the only goal of the game, taking the win 1-0. Lake Orion was looking for a win against Rochester Adams during the September 14th home game. The teams went back and forth during the heated game, but the Highlanders managed to come out on top with a final score of 2-0. A couple of days later, Orion went to Woodhaven High School for the Warrior Invite. Lake Orion's first competitors were the Milford Mavericks. The Dragons had a great start and shut out the Mavericks 3-0, breaking their losing streak. Renewed by their victory, the Dragons moved on to face the Boston Huron Chiefs. Lake Orion showed just how powerful their offense could be, winning the game with a final score of 5-1 and moving on to the final round of the invite. The Brownstown Woodhaven Warriors were the final matchup for Lake Orion. The Dragons once again found success and took the win 3-0. On September 19th, the Dragons were back at home to face off against the West Bloomfield Lakers. The Dragons took early control of the game when Jaron Caballo scored the first goal of the game in the first half. Ben Capoulas quickly scored yet another goal for the Dragons, raising the lead to 2-0. With a little over 16 minutes left in the first half, Carballo scored his second goal of the evening, sending the Dragons into the second half with a whopping 3-0 lead. The Lakers finally got on the board with a single goal during the second half. Lake Orion quickly regrouped and carried on to earn 2 additional goals. Logan Bulla and Alberto Hernandez were the Dragon goal scorers during the second and helped Lake Orion to clinch a 5-1 victory over West Bloomfield. The cross-country teams for Lake Orion have been very busy these past 3 weeks, traveling to weekend invitationals at Kensington Metro Park, Holly, and most recently Linden. Here's Ian with more on how the teams fared during this grueling stretch of the season.
Thanks, Kevin. The Lake Orion cross-country teams have been putting in the miles, not only in their training, but also on the bus, traveling to 3 invites around Oakland County. First up was the Averill Invitational at Kensington Metro Park in Milford on September 9th. This meet is a tune-up for the Oakland County meet coming up on October 7th. This event was loaded with 19 teams from Southeast Michigan. The varsity women would start off the racing under perfect conditions. The Lady Dragons were still without junior Allison Sherman and would lean on the experience of the sophomore class and the feisty freshmen to make their mark on the leaderboard. Sophie Novak and Emily Leopold would again lead the Dragon charge, finishing 5th and 7th respectively. Junior Olivia Ames would put forth her best effort of the season to take 17th overall, all 3 making the medal podium. Marissa O'Leary and Iris Meach would finish 33rd and 47th overall to close out the scoring for the Dragons. Totaling it all up, the Dragons would score 109 points for a 4th place overall team finish. Behind the winning team from Troy with 72 points, Milford would take the runner-up trophy in a tiebreaker. 3rd place would go to White Lake with 99 points. On the men's side, the Dragons continued to find their identity, but put in some nice runs against top competition. The team would take 5th overall with 155 points. Milford, Stony Creek, and Brighton would take the top 3 team spots. Sophomore Andrew Nolan again showed that he belongs in the conversation as LO's MVP, finishing on the medal podium in 4th place with a 5K time of 16:72.2 on this challenging course. Junior Ryan Mulcahy would join Nolan on the medal stand, taking 21st for the Dragons. Drew Gimes 37th, Matt Mulligan's 43rd, and Nate Hammond's 51st place would round out the scoring for Lake Orion. The teams would regroup 1 week later and travel to the Holly Invitational on September 16th. One of the biggest meets of the season also saw the debut of the Lake Orion Middle School teams in action for the first time. Varsity and JV teams from Oakview, Walden, and Scripps began their races bright and early at 8 a.m. Perfect racing conditions once again met the runners as they made their way through the challenging 3K course. The boys team from Oakview would take the runner-up team trophy just 2 points behind Oxford. They were led by 8th grader Jacob Gleason, who was the overall champion, finishing in 10 minutes, 56.2 seconds. The ladies from Scripps would take 4th place overall with 121 points. Scripps was led by 6th grader Megan Fox's 13th place finish in 12 minutes, 54.5 seconds. A great showing from these young Dragons. On to the varsity races. Teams from as far north as Sault Ste. Marie and as far west as Saugatuck took part in this festival of races. Over 80 teams made the trip to see how they stacked up against other teams in the respective divisions. LO was competing in the top division with many on hand to see some of the best talent in the entire state. The Lady Dragons were off the line in a flash, eager to prove they were one of the top teams in the region. The hilly course changed elevations and footing, making this one of the most challenging races these teams would face all season. The Lady Dragons were happy to have Allison Sherman back in the Varsity 7, and she didn't disappoint, finishing 1st for the Dragons and 5th overall. Emily Leopold finished 7th, Olivia Ames 14th, Marissa O'Leary 29th, and Abby Locke was 37th overall out of 127 runners to close out the scoring for LO. Locke would finish just 2 places off the medal podium. The solid performances by the Varsity 7 would propel them to a runner-up team finish with 92 total points. Fenton dominated the field with 76 points, winning the 2017 title. The LO men would have their hands full with some of the top teams in the state of Michigan. Ann Arbor Pioneer would dominate the field, taking the team championship with 41 total points. Plymouth was 2nd with 55 points. Oxford would take 3rd. The Dragons would charge to 7th place on solid runs by Andrew Nolan's 12th place finish and Ryan Mulcahy's 21st place finish, both making the medal podium. The ladies would travel solo to the 35th annual Linden Classic on Saturday, September 23rd. The Lady Dragons were one of 39 high school teams competing under very uncomfortable weather conditions. Race time temperatures were close to 90 degrees with a heat index of over 100 degrees. All runners and coaches were making sure hydration was a priority. Arrangements were also made to have cooling tanks, ice towels, and cold water available for runners after their races. Battling the temperatures were one thing, but battling the Linden course was another. The course meandered through sun-scorched grass fields, hard-pan dirt, gravel paths, and a wooded area littered with exposed roots and ruts. Every footfall had to be specific and true. The Lady Dragons Varsity 8 would not be shooting for best times today. They concentrated on place and finishing strong, and that they did. Freshman Sophie Novak would again lead the Dragons charge with a 3rd place overall finish. Leopold would be right on her heels in 5th place. Marissa O'Leary had an inspired run to finish 15th, while Olivia Ames would take 18th, all making the medal podium. Abby Locke again finished just off the medal podium in 29th place to round out the scoring. This strong performance under tough conditions earned the Lady Dragons the overall team championship of the Linden Classic for 2017. Scoring 68 points, this was their best point total of 2017 and was a true team effort. LO finished just 2 small points ahead of Flushing. LHS will host the 2nd OAA Red Jamboree on Wednesday, September 27th, and travel to Milford once again to take part in one of the most competitive cross-country events in the state, the Oakland County Championships on October 7th. We'll have all the results on our next show. Reporting for LO Sports Update, I'm Ian Locke.
That wraps up this episode of Lake Orion Sports Update. Make sure you tune in the next time for more of the latest news in the fall sports season. and we'll see you the next time that you see us. Take care.